This is a story about Richard III, King of England. However, unlike most other stories about royal history, which start at the beginning, this royal story begins with his death. Richard III was King of England from 1483 until his death in 1485. He was the last king of the Plantagenet dynasty in its cadet branch, the House of York. His defeat and death at the Battle of Bosworth Field, the last decisive battle of the War of the Roses, marked the end of the Middle Ages in England. There were two major rebellions against Richard during his reign. In October of 1483, an unsuccessful revolt was led by staunch allies of Edward IV and Richard's former ally, Henry Stafford II, Duke of Buckingham. Then, another rebellion in August of 1485. Henry Tudor and his uncle Jasper Tudor landed in Wales with a contingent of French troops and marched through Pembrokeshire recruiting soldiers. Henry's forces defeated Richard's army near the Leicestershire town of Market Bosworth. Richard was slain, making him the last king to die in battle. Henry Tudor then ascended the throne as Henry VII. King Richard III's body was buried and forgotten for over 525 years. Then, on August 24th of 2012, the University of Leicester, Leicester City Council, and the Richard III Society announced that they were going to look for the remains of King Richard. The participants looked for the lost site of the former Greyfriars Church, demolished during King Henry VIII's dissolution of the monasteries, to find his remains. The diggers found Greyfriars Church by September 5th of 2012. A human skeleton was found beneath the church's choir. Improbably, the excavators found the remains in the first dig at the car park. On September 12th, it was announced that the skeleton discovered during the search might be that of King Richard III. Several reasons were given. The body was of an adult male, it was buried beneath the choir of the church, and there was severe scoliosis of the spine, possibly making one shoulder higher than the other. Additionally, there was an object that appeared to be an arrowhead embedded in the spine, and there were injuries to the skull which happened at the time of his death. These included a relatively shallow orifice, which is most likely to have been caused by a rondel dagger, and a scooping depression to the skull, inflicted by a bladed weapon, most probably a sword. Further, the bottom of the skull presented a gaping hole where a halberd had cut away and entered it. Forensic pathologist Stuart Hamilton stated that this injury would have left the individual's brain visible and most certainly would have been the cause of death. Joe Appleby, the osteoarchaeologist who excavated the skeleton, concurred and described the latter as a mortal battlefield wound in the back of the skull. The base of the skull also presented another fatal wound in which a bladed weapon had been thrust into it, leaving behind a jagged hole. Closer examination of the interior of the skull revealed a mark opposite this wound, showing that the blade penetrated to a depth of 10.5 centimeters. In total, the skeleton presented 10 wounds, 4 minor injuries on the top of the skull, 1 dagger blow on the cheekbone, 1 cut on the lower jaw, 2 fatal injuries on the base of the skull, 1 cut on a rib bone, and 1 final wound on the pelvis, most probably inflicted after death. Following the discoveries of Richard's remains in 2012, it was decided that they should be reburied at Leicester Cathedral. His remains were carried to the procession to the cathedral on March 22nd of 2015 and reburied on March 26th of 2015 at a religious reburial service. The tombstone is deeply incised with a cross and consists of a rectangular block of white Swaledale fossil stone quarried in North Yorkshire. It sits on a low plinth made of dark Kilkenny marble, incised with Richard's name, date, and motto. The plinth also carries his coat of arms in Pietra Dora. I hope you enjoyed this video about King Richard III. See you in the next one.